Hello, my name is Layla Andrews and welcome to my week ahead analysis for the 23rd of July 2017, and today I'm going to be looking at the dollar CAD chart, and as usual I like to start with the monthly and give you a bit of a context. So with this particular one I want to first of all point out this turquoise line that I have joined from this high here and this particular spike that rejected through and pushed price quite a lot lower at that point. So I've joined these two, and I admit that trying to find the bisection line for this particular currency pair was actually quite difficult. But I started with this, which is usually how I start, to give myself a potential kind of angle that may be a sort of angle that can be repeated through the entirety of the chart's patterns, if you like. So I'll just show you what I mean. So this is where I started, joining the two peaks and then seeing if it measures in quite well in certain areas. It doesn't look too bad there, and I also tried it down here as well to give us a bit of an area that could be of interest, which to be honest with you I wasn't convinced by that one, but the one that I found the most interesting, and I'll explain why it's the most interesting, is because well, this is where I found it most interesting, and the reason why is because there's a number of occasions where price is reacting to it from either below or above, and it's done this on a few occasions all the way through here. And particularly I'm interested in this recent activity, because that's where it's going to matter the most for where we are at the moment. So in general terms, I've estimated that the level is around about here, which gives us a sort of bisection point between these two areas of what was a peak high and which was a low on this particular sell-off period. So just to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see a bit more closely what I'm talking about. Just while we're actually in this particular area, I just want you to see that this is nicely separating price from above and below. Not the cleanest here, but we still have a good rejection point here. So it's in general, and I'm afraid it was one of those ones that was a little bit more difficult to, as I say, place. But looking at where we are currently, there's a number of factors that I think could be of importance and interest, because price on dollar CAD is coming up to a couple of decision points, and the first of which is going to be I'm going to talk about on the monthly chart, which is this 50 EMA that's coming up to the 124 area. But this obviously with EMAs, particularly on the higher time frames, obviously as each month changes there will be a little bit of a jump. So where I've estimated it is for right now could well change minutely on a month chart, but in real terms it could be as much as 50 pips. So in theory, somewhere in here is a zone between 124 and 125, and I'll talk about 125 in a sec. But just wanted you to see that this bisection line, which as I've shown you how I acquired it, as I've put through here, is coming into connecting with the sort of zone that I've described, which is the 124 slash 125 area. So here we have the 50 EMA on the monthly chart coming up quite nearby to where price action is. So let's have a look at the weekly and get a little bit more of a look at that. So although we have been selling off quite deeply for some time, as you can see here, this is the weekly chart. Although we have been selling off for some time, we haven't had much in the way of pullbacks. At this stage there is a little bit of overextension, but when I show you what the daily looks like, you'll see that actually we're not that overextended. So price could continue to move lower using the daily time frame as a means of relieving some of its pressure. But as it stands at the moment, we've also got here a 200 EMA coming in on the weekly chart, which could provide an interesting opportunity for price to react to it. So we've got a number of factors in play here. We've got the 125 price level, which of course is a pretty good psychological level. It's also where we had the recent low. This is where the 200 EMA on the weekly is coming in. It's also where we have our bisection point coming into play, which could play a little bit of a part. So at the moment, we've got strong selling pressure, but possibly coming into an interesting area of potential support, and this is what we want to look out for, because if there is potential support here, then we may find that price bounces away from it, and we get a bit of a period of buying, which is what could be of interest on some of the lower time frames. Or what it does do is it gives us an idea about the strength of how much downward pressure is actually in this chart, because if it does manage to break through this number of elements, including the 124, then we do have a lot of commitment to the downside on this particular currency pair. So that's another way of reading points and areas of interest, which are generally factors like price levels and EMAs that come into a sort of zone together. Now, if we look at the daily, you'll see what I mean about the lack of overextension. Let me just get back into position. As you can see, this is where we currently are at the moment. Please ignore this line for the time being, because MT4 has a habit of moving it if you get too many time frames away from the chart that you place it on. So this is actually not in the correct area. It should actually be somewhere down here underneath. But for the time being, we have got a currency pair which is just eking itself lower. None of these bars are particularly oversized. There's a good angle here. It's still reasonably steep. These EMAs are nicely in order. They're nicely fanned out. They're nice and smooth. They're not too wide apart. So I don't see a great deal of overextension. Now, what this could imply is that we come to a natural sort of zone. For this point, I cannot say for entirely sure whether it's going to be the 125 or the 124, but what I'd be looking for is signs on the daily time frame that we're beginning to slow down, and by that I'd have to see price bars starting to chop and change between buyers and seller bars. I would also need to see a sort of a sideways type of price action. Maybe it won't happen immediately, but it's a sense that this is slowing down, that this angle is no longer as sharp, and that we start to see much more sort of shallow interaction into this support level at 125. So that's what I would be looking for. So for the time being, this particular analysis is entirely about a potential point of interest where price may bounce. At the moment, price action is still looking short into it, which does imply that it may well want to test the 125 area and possibly even the 124 area. But as I say, there's a couple of powerful EMAs on both the weekly and the monthly. The monthly has the 50 and the weekly has the 200 coming into this zone. So this is potentially an area where we might be finding a bounce. To have a bit of a heads up on where that is also gives you an idea about how much further this price action might move, and therefore you can decide whether to be in or out of the market at that point, because if you're going to be selling into support, you really need to be far away enough from it to make it count. Okay, so that's everything I want to say about dollar CAD. Thank you very much for listening, and look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye bye.